There is a 3,000-year-old text that precisely describes where the human soul goes when it dies. Not in metaphors or vague poetry, but with different cameras, names of angels, and real geography. Only one man in all of history crossed to the other side without dying and returned carrying that map. It was cited by the apostles, read by the early fathers of the Christian church, and then it disappeared. Not because the scholars doubted him, but because what he described was too disturbing for the institution. But before revealing what that man saw, you need to understand exactly how the text survived. In the mountains of Ethiopia, a community of priests hand-copied it for 3,000 consecutive years. They did not preserve it as a historical relic, but as sacred scripture read in their liturgy every week. While the Western world erased its name, that ancient African church preserved every word intact. The man who wrote that map was Enoch, and what he recorded was buried with deliberate intent. Only in Genesis is it mentioned that God took him without him dying, a statement with no equivalent anywhere in the Bible. The Book of Enoch is not a marginal document produced by a dark and completely unknown sect. It is one of the oldest religious texts in humanity, with an extraordinary history of transmission. Scholars date it to at least the 3rd century before Christ, possibly several centuries earlier. It predated the Roman Empire in its full power when the legion had not yet dominated the known world. It was already an ancient and deeply revered text when Jesus walked the streets of Jerusalem. And the men who wrote the New Testament knew it, read it, and openly quoted it. The Epistle of Jude, a book that still remains in your Bible, directly quotes the Book of Enoch. Jude 1:14 explicitly names Enoch, and the cited passage does not exist in the Hebrew Scriptures. It comes directly from chapter 1, verse 9 of the Book of Enoch, word for word. Tertullian, in the 2nd century, passionately defended its authenticity before the early church. Origen cited it, Clement of Alexandria referenced it, and it circulated openly among the early believers. It was neither hidden nor secret in the early centuries of Christianity. It was venerated and taught. Then, something changed in the 4th century when the Roman Empire officially adopted Christianity. Political power merged with theological authority, and certain councils began to draw boundaries. They decided which books belonged to the sacred scriptures and which ones should be definitively excluded. The Council of Laodicea in the year 363 and the Council of Carthage in the year 397 drew those lines. The Book of Enoch fell outside those boundaries, and the reasons given were purely technical in nature. Disputed authorship, content difficult to reconcile with the emerging canon, text too old. But none of those reasons fully explained the extreme urgency with which it then disappeared. What it contained about death, judgment, and the structure of the underworld was deeply unsettling. It did not fit with the simplified narrative that the institutional church was building about the afterlife. For 1400 years, there was no complete copy of the Book of Enoch in Europe. None. Scholars knew that it had existed because they saw it cited in Jude and in the patristic writers. But the text itself had disappeared, as if methodically erased from the Western historical record. In 1773, a Scottish explorer named James Bruce returned from Ethiopia bringing something completely unexpected. He brought 3 handwritten copies of a sacred text that the Western world had deemed lost forever. He had traveled to one of the oldest Christian nations in the world, with an uninterrupted history. Ethiopia had never participated in the ecclesiastical councils that excluded Enoch from the Western canon. The Ethiopian church had preserved it as a living scripture, copied by its monks without interruption, read in its liturgy, taught in its seminaries, preserved with the same care as the Gospels. While the West drew boundaries of acceptable belief, Ethiopia held the complete testimony. While the West searched among medieval ruins, the text remained alive in the hands of present-day Ethiopian monks. And then, in 1947, the story became impossible to ignore even for the most demanding skeptics. In caves along the northwest coast of the Dead Sea, archaeologists found the Dead Sea Scrolls. Among them were multiple fragments of the Book of Enoch, in Aramaic, ancient, pre-Christian, and intact. Hidden there by a Jewish sect that considered them too sacred to let them perish. 7 copies in 7 different caves, all confirming the same text that Ethiopia had preserved. The Book of Enoch was not a medieval invention, nor was it a forgery from later times. It was a widely revered text, carefully preserved and confirmed by multiple independent sources. A text that described with unsettling and sustained precision what lies on the other side of death. Now the pages open, and what they contain completely changes how you have understood death until today. When most people hear the word Sheol, they think of a vague concept, the grave, the place of the dead. A kind of shapeless theological waiting room, without geography, without differences among those who wait. That is the version that the canonical texts preserved, stripped of detail and reduced to shadow. What the Book of Enoch describes is something completely different and much more specific than that. In chapters 22 to 27, known as the Book of the Watchers, Enoch travels. He is taken by the archangel Uriel on a journey through the ends of the earth beyond the visible world. He is shown mountains, rivers, and structures that exist beyond what normal eyes perceive. And there, at the very edge of the known cosmos, Enoch contemplates the Sheol as it truly exists. What completely halts him in his tracks is that Sheol is neither a single chamber nor a formless void. According to Enoch, it is a place of 4 distinct hollow spaces carved into the rock of a great mountain. Each one completely separate from the others, each one designed for a specific category of soul. 4 chambers, 4 different destinations, based on the nature of how each person lived and died. Not in a final judgment that has not yet occurred, but in what the soul truly was during its life. Think about what that means. Death does not lead to sleep or to an egalitarian waiting room. The soul is immediately assessed upon arrival, classified with mathematical precision, placed where it belongs. Before the resurrection, before the final judgment, before the end of all things that the cosmos knows. The first chamber that Enoch describes is bright inside, and there is a spring of water within it. The souls rest there in peace, separated from the darkness by what the text calls an abyss of light. These are the souls of the righteous dead, who lived according to the truth and died without violence. They are not in torment, they are not in darkness. They wait, but in a place specifically prepared for them. However, the second chamber is radically different, and its description shakes anyone who reads it. The second chamber contains those who were righteous, but were killed by violent men. They suffered unjust deaths, and their condition contrasts brutally with the tranquility of the first chamber. Their voices echo against the stone walls, calling for justice, demanding that their blood be avenged. Enoch asks the angel about this, and the answer he receives is devastating in its documentary precision. These souls will not rest until their murderers have faced the judgment they deserve. Their request is being heard right now before any final court has been convened. Then comes the third chamber, and here the temperature of the text itself drops considerably all of a sudden. This includes those who died in sin, neither victims nor great wrongdoers, just ordinary people. They lived in daily commitment and died without having accounted for what they had done. They are not in active torment, but neither are they consoled. They wait in a suspended isolation. They exist in a silence that is in itself a form of judgment, a condition without light and without voice. And then there is the fourth chamber, and the text doesn't take long here, because it simply doesn't need to. The description is brief, but the weight it carries is almost unbearable for someone reading it for the first time. The fourth chamber contains the souls of those who committed deep evil and never sought correction. There is no spring of water here. There is no light. There is no voice of plea, only complete darkness. And these souls are already experiencing consequences before the final judgment has pronounced anything. This detail is not a minor note. It is a structural challenge to an entire theological tradition of the beyond. If Sheol is already ordered, if the souls are in their places according to what they were in life exactly, so the classification does not wait for any priest, any sacrament, or any institutional declaration. At the moment the last breath leaves the body, the accounting has already begun on its own. That is a dangerous idea for any institution that derives its power from control over what comes next. There is a detail in the description of the first chamber that most summaries always omit, and it may be the most important of the entire text, the one that connects Enoch the most with the New Testament. Enoch describes a spring of water, not a metaphor, not a poetic image, but a real spring. Described with the same objective specificity with which a geographer would describe a river on Earth. It is simply there, as if it had always been, as if the water in that place were natural. For anyone who has read the New Testament carefully, this detail evokes a cold recognition. In the Gospel of Luke, chapter 16, Jesus tells the story of the rich man and Lazarus. The rich man dies and finds himself in a place of torment, with no possibility of escape or relief. Lazarus the beggar also dies and is carried to Abraham's bosom, in comfort and in complete peace. The rich man looks across a great, impassable abyss and sees Lazarus on the other side, in the light. He asks Abraham to send him a drop of water to cool his tongue scorched by the heat. A single drop of water, he can see it from where he is. He knows it exists on the other side of the great abyss. But that abyss between his chamber and theirs cannot be crossed. Abraham confirms it explicitly. Water, an abyss, separation between the righteous and the unjust, multiple chambers with simultaneous conditions. All of this happening before any final judgment has been issued, in an intermediate state. Jesus was not inventing this geography. He was describing the map that Enoch had recorded earlier, with the same elements and in the same order, as if both men were describing the same place. Because in fact, they were doing it, and the manuscripts confirm this without any possible ambiguity. The question this raises is not whether the connection between the two texts is real. The manuscripts confirm it. The question is why this parallel was not maintained in the tradition that followed the early centuries. Why did the theology that preserved the words of Jesus eliminate the text that explained them most precisely? It was easier to bury the map than to answer that question, and that is exactly what happened. There is a figure in the Book of Enoch that does not appear by name in the Western canonical Bible. but whose function is described with such specific detail that it is impossible to dismiss it as a myth. His name is Uriel, one of the 4 archangels in the Enochian tradition, with well-defined roles. Miguel the warrior, Gabriel the messenger, Raphael the healer, and Uriel with a completely different role. Uriel means the light or flame of God, and his specific role is the one most closely related to death of all. Uriel is the guardian of Sheol. It is he who takes Enoch through the 4 chambers in detail. It is Uriel who explains the classification, the spring, the abyss, the cries of the murdered souls. It is Uriel who acts as the registrar of the dead, the angel who knows each soul by name. He knows where each one belongs and ensures that it arrives exactly at the place it corresponds to, without error. And Uriel is almost completely absent from the Western Christian tradition, methodically erased. The Catholic Church officially recognizes only 3 archangels, and Uriel's status has been minimized. The same councils that removed the Book of Enoch acted in the same direction regarding Uriel. The spirits of their descendants, the Nephilim who died in the flood, also have no place in Sheol. It implied that death is not a passive event, but an active process overseen by its own authority. A being with a specific mandate to ensure that no soul ends up in the wrong place, without exception. An authority that operates completely independently of any human, ecclesiastical, or political institution. The Ethiopian tradition never made that erasure, and that difference reveals what was really at stake. In the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, Uriel is venerated, has a feast day, and is mentioned in prayers. He is understood as the angel that is at the threshold after the body fails, and before the waiting. His presence in the cosmology of the beyond is not symbolic or decorative. It is functional and concrete. What does it mean that one of the oldest branches of Christianity has maintained this for 17 centuries? While Western tradition erased the name of the guardian angel, someone made that decision carefully. A deliberate and institutional choice to eliminate the specific angel, the specific cameras, the spring. Everything that made Sheol an active and ongoing reality instead of a vague substitute for judgment. There is a passage in the Book of Enoch that does not directly describe Sheol, but sheds light on its suppression. It concerns the Watchers, the beings described in Genesis 6 as the sons of God who descended. That human women took and produced offspring of enormous power, known as the Nephilim. The canonical Bible dedicates 3 verses to them and continues as if the topic were too uncomfortable. The Book of Enoch dedicates entire chapters to their names, their crimes, their punishment, and their current location. According to Enoch, the Watchers did not simply disappear after the flood, as the canonical text suggests. They were bound, imprisoned beneath the earth in chains of darkness in a place adjacent to Sheol. They await a trial that has not yet arrived, chained in the area adjacent to the 4 chambers. The spirits of his descendants, the Nephilim who died in the flood, also have no place in Sheol. They exist in a kind of cosmic no man's land, between imprisonment and complete freedom. Judas speaks of angels who did not keep their own domain, kept in eternal chains under darkness. Pedro writes about spirits in prison to whom Christ himself preached after his death. These are not abstract theological statements. They are references to the cosmology that Enoch had outlined. A cosmology where the afterlife includes imprisoned supernatural beings and assigned guardian angels, active trial before the final day, and a geography much more complex than what the Western canon preserves. This is what could not remain accessible, not because it was false, but because it was too complete. A map that includes the chambers of Sheol, the spring of the righteous, and the cries of the slain. That map leaves no room for institutional control because it operates without the need for any human authority. It is a map where divine justice is already being executed without waiting for anyone to authorize or sanction it. That map had to be buried, and so it was for 14 centuries, until the desert spoke. There is something else that the Book of Enoch describes about Sheol that its suppression prevented from reaching the west. And it may be the most transcendent revelation of the entire text, even more so than the 4 chambers described. It concerns what happens to the soul between death and resurrection in its relationship with the divine. In chapters 47 and 103, souls in Sheol that are not severed are described. They are not in a total isolation vacuum. They are aware and are in touch with the world of the living. They feel the passage of time from within the chambers and maintain an active relationship with the sky. The souls of the righteous have their names recorded in the presence of God, not asleep nor erased. The murdered souls are crying out, and those cries are being answered from the divine presence. This implies that silence about the dead is not theologically neutral, but an omission with consequences. This implies something that the removal of the Book of Enoch silently eliminated from Western theology. The relationship between the living and the dead is not severed in death, but rather transforms into another form. That the dead are somewhere conscious, and that the living and the dead remain connected. According to Enoch's testimony, this is not superstition. It reflects the real structure of the cosmos we inhabit. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church has been practicing prayers for the dead for 17 uninterrupted centuries. These practices are rooted in a cosmology that the Book of Enoch supports with documentary precision. That intuition that the dead exist actively and that what we do reaches them has a concrete origin. It may be rooted not in tradition for tradition's sake, but in the testimony of a witness who was there. Enoch did not die, and that statement appears in only 8 words throughout the text of the Hebrew Bible. Genesis 5:24, Enoch walked with God, and then he was no more because God took him away. He did not die, he was taken, without illness, without old age, without the mandatory passage through any of the 4 chambers. And the man who was taken without dying wrote in precise geographical detail about the structure of those chambers. He had seen Sheol not in a dream, but as a witness guided by Uriel through each corridor. A man who saw those chambers from the inside and returned as the only living witness of what awaits everyone. A map that was read for centuries, preserved in the highlands of Africa, confirmed in Qumran, cited in the New Testament and then systematically removed from Western religious consciousness. Removed exactly at the moment when that world was consolidating its power over what could be believed. Now you have that map in your hands, the 4 chambers, the spring, the cries, the angel of the threshold. The chained watchers, the active conscience of the waiting dead, all survived against all odds. It survived in a church in the highlands that the councils of Rome could never reach. It survived in clay jars buried in desert caves by those who considered it sacred. It survived in the notes of scholars who could not ignore what it said, even if it contradicted orthodoxy. And now it is available for anyone who seeks it, the complete text, translated and accessible tonight. The complete Book of Enoch has been translated into Spanish. You can read it tonight without any restrictions. When you reach chapter 22, You will recognize exactly what you are reading without any help. You will recognize the rich man and Lazarus, the cries for justice, the spring, and the great abyss. You will recognize a cosmology that the writers of the New Testament knew and assumed everyone understood. An audience that had not yet been stripped of the text that made all that ancient cosmology coherent. But the question that this knowledge raises is not merely historical, academic, or archaeological. If the afterlife has the structure that Enoch described, if the souls are already in their assigned places, if justice is already being partially executed before the final judgment, then the most important question changes. It is not which councils decided which books were acceptable to guide the faith of millions of people. The most important question is for what chamber you are being formed, not at the final judgment, but now. In the decisions of each day, in the concrete way you treat those who cannot defend themselves, in how you respond to injustice, in how you navigate a world that, according to this map, is being watched, much more observed and much more subject to scrutiny than any religious institution has informed you. Enoch walked through those chambers and returned carrying the map. He wrote everything down, and that text has not died. Somewhere in the mountains of Ethiopia, a monk is copying it by hand at this very moment, copying it exactly as its predecessors did 1,000 years ago, preserving what someone wanted to erase. The archive still exists, the 4 chambers are still waiting, and Uriel knows each name in advance. If this knowledge opens something in you, and you want to keep discovering the texts that were attempted to be suppressed, subscribe.